on air. How do you want to begin?
That's the way we begin. We sync our energies together.
Wonderful. Let's go.
Just tell me when you're ready.
Ready to go. We are recording, sir.
Okay, it's really great to be with you, Sean. Super excited about this.
Yeah, me too.
You've interviewed a bunch of my friends, and it just seemed appropriate.
Yeah, it was just a matter of time, I think, before we finally connected for a conversation, for sure.
Yeah. So before I do any events or sync ups, or before I do any speaking engagements, or before we work as a team, before we even eat, we like to sync our energy. It just brings us into the same zone. You want to do that with me?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you can either cross your ankles or your legs. So I'm crossing my leg over, my right one over my left, kind of like you're sitting. Right arm underneath left armpit, left arm on top. Turn your head to the left and your body to the right. Okay, we'll take 6 breaths together, and 3 through the mouth and 3 through the nose. Breathe in through the mouth. 2, 3, through the nose. 2, 3. Okay, how do you feel?
Feel good. I feel spacey over here on my left side.
Yeah, a little dialed in, right? I did this with Gail from KFLA News, and she did a podcast with me. She had a third party, like a co-host, and she got so synced into it, she forgot about the co-host for half the podcast.
Let's start with why that specific maneuver.
So basically, if we were to walk together, our heartbeats would sync in about 30 minutes. If our feet and our step would sync together in about 15 minutes. So when human beings are together, it's like an old school modem, like an internet modem trying to sync up. You may or may not remember those go. Those when we're trying to sync up with people's energy so that we can properly communicate. And it takes between 15 and 30 minutes. And when you put the body in the exact same physical position and you breathe 6 breaths, which is a minimum dose in fascial maneuvers, it automatically sinks you into that space or that frequency. And we like, for example, if you're cooking and you go to sit down and eat, it takes about 20 minutes for you to feel the food, right?
Yeah.
That's because your body's slightly in stress from cooking. Now, when you sync up, your body comes out of stress and you eat, and then you become more satiated quicker. So these are
Hmm.
just little tools that we learned along the way. Originally, it was for syncing teams and athletes, but it works with everything.
Awesome. Why specifically the crossing of the ankles, the right hand under the left arm? Why those specific postures? And
Well, we could have gone the left way. We could have gone like this. As long as the body's in the same shape when
yeah.
you breathe, that's how energy works. Because our bodies are a human antenna. And we're actually built like a wireless receiver, so more like a cellular phone. So we both broadcast and send. And if we're the same exact frequency, then it matches. It's like a pattern. It's very much like a harmonic note.
Yeah. I found myself during that posture and breath, going a little bit further and breathing a little bit deeper and twisting a little bit more. And I think I do an exercise when I do keynotes where I have people put their thumb in front of their face and then say, okay, now rotate it towards the back. Okay, now take a couple of breaths and go deeper and further back. And it's just sort of like stretches their perception of what they're capable of. And so I found myself getting into that, like, well, I can twist even more. Well, I'm competitive, so, and I know you are too. So it's like, well, I'm gonna twist even more. I'm gonna go as deep and far as I can. So it's interesting to start it off this way. You said a term that is really like the fundamental, foundational for this podcast, for my lifestyle, and I think for all of my listeners, which is minimum effective dose. You said minimum dose,
Yes.
and I think that's at the heart of biohacking. I think that's the heart of optimization because people are busy and distracted. So do the littlest amount of possible that's going to give you that effect. Um, and I think that's also why what you're doing is so incredible to watch because someone walks in crooked and saggy and sad, and you work with them for a very short period of time, and they're upright, tight, and alert and optimistic. So there's so many questions I want to go, but maybe we'll just start by talking about that idea of minimum effective dose.
Well, fascial maneuvers is built on a principle of observation. So I observed the body as I was working with tens of thousands of people over the years. And there's every body worker or every practitioner will have some sort of rhythm that they do themselves, something that they do. And when I would find something that would work, I would share it with somebody else in the clinic, one of the other practitioners, see if it worked for them. And we just kept doing things along the way. And we discovered these unique patterns. For example, you have 10 organs in your body, and then you have your fascia and your skin. So 12 organs. Well, six of them run hot, six of them run cold. So if you bring six breaths, three through the lower side, which is through the mouth, and three through the upper side above the diaphragm, then you're getting the hot organs cool down. So then you're more in present. And so there's actually some mechanics behind it. And I'm going to say some things probably on this podcast that these are just my observations, and I've learned enough about the human body to know that we don't really know anything. And I have a story about why all this stuff works, and I'm completely open to the fact that everything I say is complete bullshit. And in a year or two, I'll have a whole other story about it. But right now, it just allows me to convey the story in a way that makes some sort of meaning or sense.
What a great place to start. That just makes you even more likable. When someone says, "Hey, I could be full of shit. I don't know anything." It's like, man, swoon for for that.
I got to tell you though, let me put something in perspective. I was talking to Dr. Tom Cowan a couple weeks ago, and he's the guy that fights the narrative of the body and the system. And ironically, without even reading his work or even I knew of him but never read his stuff, I was coming to the same conclusions. And we have, for example, this just to put it in perspective so that we can take this we know stuff off the table. Everything in our body that works requires a protein function to work. Now, not protein you eat, but proteins that are in the cells. And your cells have between 5 and 20,000 proteins. And for this example, we use 10,000 as an argument. That means you have 50 trillion cells, 10,000 proteins per cell. That's 5 quintillion proteins. Now, to say that we reasonably scientifically understood this, we should know what about 3 quintillion proteins, maybe half, maybe 2.5. We've only identified 100,000, and we only know what 5,000 do reasonably, and we're not even really good at that. So for us to say that we know, and every function of the body from thinking to blinking is run by these things. So for us to say that we have a good understanding or understanding of the human body is completely ludicrous. And I think since I didn't come from medicine, I came from technology, and I started looking at it from the outside. I just couldn't accept basic principles, and that was one of them. We don't know anything.
I love that. I love that. It's the classic biohacker innovator approach, which is you found what works for you. It kept working. You shared it. It caught on, and off to the races. People are changing their lives. What's your origin story? Tell us about the genesis to these fascial maneuvers.
Well, I mean, it goes back. I mean, first of all, I was a seeker. And the difference between me and, let's say, a typical biohacker is I became a practitioner. So I actually went into clinical practice. I had 52 practitioners. I had every discipline working around me. And I spent $17 million over the course of a decade with all of the best inputs that you can imagine worldwide from every sport and every analysis teaching me. So it wasn't just a simple observation. It was actually backed by literally 10,000 active patients, hundreds of thousands of treatments, running 5,000 appointments a month and observing them all. So for me, I was a bodybuilder when I was young, and this is in the 80s, and this is where biohacking actually started. It was the true biohacking. There was no equipment, there was no technology. I mean, we had to play around with a few supplements. There were very few at that time. We had agablum, we had desiccated liver, we had some vitamins. We had things like potassium that we could get. We had essential oils, and we had steroids, and that was it. I mean, that was the world of biohacking back in the 80s. And I competed in the mid 80s through to the late 80s. Well, I fell under a 600-pound squat. And that was a starting series of escalations of issues, which a lot of people have. They have an issue, they work through it. You know, a couple of years later, they seem to be okay, but then something else happens and so on. So over the next 20 years, I spent 10 years in about a 2 to 4 kind of an achy pain. I wouldn't describe it too much as pain, just constant annoyance. And then for 10 more years, it grew into a pain where it was a 6 to 9 pain every day. And I'd spent $2.5 million with hundreds of practitioners all over the world trying to resolve it, even to the point of hiring practitioners, because I thought, if they couldn't fix me, if I knew what it was that they knew, maybe I could figure out why they couldn't fix me. And that's the way my logical brain would work. In 2010, I lost the ability to even use a computer. I literally sat in front of a screen and I couldn't use it. I knew at that point that my brain had lost its ability to function, and there was only two options. Either I figure it out or I commit suicide. And there wasn't an in-between in those, because I've watched people degrade in brain function, I just didn't want any part of that life. So I literally curled up in a ball on the floor, and I spent about 8 hours. I fell asleep. I woke up and I just said, I'm going to fix this. And I went to the only person who'd ever really helped me, Dr. David Rubenstein. He had this brain body calibration, and it would get me out of pain, but it wouldn't keep me there, but at least it would give me space. And since I needed to have it literally daily, the only way to do this was turn it into a business. And that's how I got into business. And that's how I became a practitioner, because I physically needed that.
Wow. The the sheer volume of content and maneuvers that you post is staggering. And I think for some people who are, have high school sports injuries, or childbirth injuries, or whatever, or just sort of general pain from sitting, I think it's probably challenging for people to say, okay, where do I start? I love this idea of being able to maneuver myself with my own hands in these different postures to alleviate X or Y. What is what's a typical or impactful first maneuver or first chain of maneuvers that people can sink their teeth into to start?
The very first and easiest one, because we had basically 10 essential maneuvers, but getting people to commit to 10 in 45 minutes when it's something new, it's a little bit of an uphill climb. So we took the most impactful three of them, which is called the 15-minute stress reset. And in the first 7 to 10 minutes, it reduces your stress by 75 to 90%. Now, that makes a meaningful impact in people's lives. And the reduction of stress is by far the greatest issue that it has. But if I was to tell you what actually is the most effective, it's not what people would think. We have 10 organs, and all those organs have, traditionally, we think of them as meridians. Now, I don't think of them that way, but I'll use that for this discussion. So we have like lung comes down here, and large intestine and heart through here. And we have these meridians that run around our body. Call those, even if they were meridians, the way that we think about, they're like lines that either move us or restrict us. When your organs are in balance, your physicality of movement is also in balance. Well, I'll show you. We could do a couple of them right here while we're on the podcast.
Yeah.
So when was your birthday again, Sean? I forgot.
March 12th, 83.
Okay. So for you, a big issue is feet.
It is a big issue for me. It's a massive issue.
Yeah. Okay. And the other one is forehead right here and the back of neck right there.
Okay, yeah.
This area of the forehead is also affected by the liver, which is also for Aries. But take your right hand, put it on your center bone, and then go down the right side of your rib cage till it curves. And then push underneath the rib cage so you get your fingers underneath the rib cage, and that's up in your liver. And you can twist your hands a little bit, just give a little torque if you want. Take your left hand, put it behind your neck. Okay, for all of these, and we'll do a bunch of these as we go through the podcast. Let's do six, three through the mouth and three through the nose. So breathe in through your mouth. 2, 3, through the nose. 2, 3. And let's use a programming statement. Say, thank you, anger and resentment.
Thank you, anger, resentment.
I no longer need to hold you in my body.
I no longer need to hold you in my body.
I'm letting you go now.
I'm letting you go now.
That changed you somehow.
Yeah.
What changed?
I suddenly feel it in my lower left abdomen physically and emotionally feel almost sad or remorseful. Like
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So Um, so that means that to me, that means that, I mean, we all hold on to emotions, and those emotions that we hold on to are in our body and we operate on top of them
Yeah.
without really getting down below. And they pop up every once in a while to remind us. Um, Now, if we want to balance that off, let's go to the other side of the rib cage, and that's the stomach. And you just grab the right on where it turns, you just grab the skin and pull it towards the center. And take your left hand. So we're grabbing, for
Oh.
people listening by audio, you're grabbing the skin on the right side of the rib cage. You're pulling just underneath the rib cage, pulling the skin towards the center line of the body. Take your left hand and touch your neck and your trap, just anywhere there, placing it there. And breathe in through your mouth. 2, 3. Open through your nose. 2, 3. Say, I'm learning to believe in myself.
I'm learning to believe in myself.
I'm I believe in my body's ability to perform and heal.
I believe in my body's ability to perform and heal. Hmm. I had tingling happening straight down from where my hand was down into my lower trunk.
Yeah.
Um,
That's where so we're actually routing out a problem. Your body has these 10 organs and they all communicate, and each one of them has an emotion attached to it.
mhm.
So this is why you asked me what is the most powerful. Well, this is actually the diagnostic system. So that's pointing us down to the bladder. And bladder has the root emotion of fear. And the other root emotion is desire, which is the stomach, which you just felt.
Hmm. Hmm.
So if we go right to the bladder, take your right hand and push it right into your pubic bone. So right above your pubic bone, push it in. Squeeze your butt cheek and kind of push yeah, so you push your bladder up. And then take your left hand, put it behind your neck again, and breathe in through your mouth. 2, 3. Through the nose. 2, 3. Say, thank you, fear.
Thank you, fear.
I feel safe and protected in my body and my life.
I feel safe and protected in my body and my life.
I'm letting go of any fear I'm holding in my body.
I'm letting go of any fear I'm holding in my body.
Yeah. And
Hmm.
bet your butt cheeks unclenched.
They did.
So now what's your emotional state?
Placid,
Mhm.
focused, present, placid, calm.
In the zone.
Yeah,
Yeah. Not tired, not agitated, not sad, not happy. So this is a state where optimal performance happens.
sure.
And listen, there could be some people listening to this who are not Olympic level athletes, and they're going to go, "That's crazy. That's a bunch of bullshit." And after working, my clients range from a Ben Affleck to a pro basketball players to NFL to working with the Dodgers. I was working with a couple weeks ago to Tyson Gay, the Olympic runners, tri-born Olympic athletes. So what I find about Olympic athletes and pro athletes versus amateur athletes is pro athletes will do whatever works. Olympic athletes will do whatever works. Amateur athletes, amateur performers will question why they're doing it.
Hmm.
And, and so if you're questioning why you're doing this, it's because you're not yet ready to perform. And because when you get an Olympic athlete, will it work? Yeah, it'll work. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
That's the conversation with Olympic athletes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they've no time to lose, and their awareness is open to experiment. And I think that for people who are, who are amateurs or even just regular people, um, I think it's natural to have skepticism because it creates a barrier between for progress, whether it's they feel like they don't deserve it or they feel like they're not important enough or like maybe their body is not as useful or integrated into their life. But obviously we know that that's a fallacy. We need these bodies. We need them to perform. We have to nourish them in whatever, well, again, whatever way works. Do you work with any jujitsu athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some UFC athletes. I mean, I don't really work with people anymore except for demonstration. But like the last UFC fighter I think I personally worked with was Dan Brown. Um, but jujitsu is funny enough is I have been working with jujitsu athletes to train because we have fascial jujitsu. Basically, if you can anything that you can use to hurt the body, you can use to heal the body and vice versa. So jiu-jitsu is immobilization of joints, which means that you can mobilize joints using the same action with a different intent. So we have a
Hmm.
whole series of things that we train athletes. Some of the most effective ways to release back and hips and some of the harder ones is what we call fascial jiu-jitsu.
I love that. I know, we did a Instagram live a couple of weeks ago, and you were telling me about this massive world tour, which is just sort of pivoted and switched and been rescheduled a little bit, and you're now on a very short break through your journey. What, and I think that I asked you this in the Instagram live, but where does this go? Like, what is the greatest and highest intention of the work that you do or Human Garage as a paradigm?
I mean, it gets pretty deep when I think about it for why I'm doing this. I believe that society is going through a physical, emotional evolution and transformation, and most people can't really get their head around that. So let's just start off with the world's in a sick place right now. I mean, arguably every disease in the history of mankind is at its peak: mental, physical, emotional. 1 in 4 women have breast cancer. 1 in 20 kids are being diagnosed on the spectrum. Anxiety, depression, suicide at an all-time high. There's not one faculty of being a human being that is better today than it was 50 years ago. Not one. We don't even live longer. So we're at this turning point in society and in human history, actually. And this is a tool to help people navigate through that because personal health sovereignty, one of the things that happens is that if you go back 75 years ago, um, roughly 80% of the care was delivered through the moms and the grandmothers and the parents and the neighbors. And if you go back 150 years ago or 100 years ago, less than a half of a percent of the people could even see a doctor. But today, 100% of our care and the knowledge of what's happening is put in the very, very small hands of less than a percent of the people. And that causes when you centralize information, power, and control, that causes corruption and problems. And we're there. We're there with our healthcare system. And the key issue is to bring people back into health sovereignty. Because one of the things you asked earlier was, how did I get here? Well, I was a practitioner. I had 52 practitioners. I had the best of the best in the world. We were fixing whatever the teams couldn't fix. That put us up there at being some of the best in the world. And when I was home at night and in pain, because I worked all day, I worked 12 or 14 hours a day. I didn't have one of my practitioners there to help me, and I felt helpless. And I no longer wanted to feel helpless in my own body at any time. And if what was standing in between me and feeling good in my body or not feeling helpless was another person, there's fundamentally a problem with that. And that's where the fascial maneuvers came from. And this is my desire for people. And this is why we're going around the world, because it's simple. I mean, I had spent a total of $17 million plus 2.5 of my own. You're getting just sub $20 million and 3 decades to only find out that these movements that I started to do with Jason and Cynthia and our founders that we do every day, these simple movements at 30, 35 minutes a day took me out of pain for the first time in 30 years and kept me there. Not just took me out of there, allowed me to navigate the changing landscape of my body's performance daily. So we're starting there. But where I will, after this tour, you have my word that after this tour, I will never talk about healing the body again, ever.
You told me that before, and I would love to hear why.
Well, there's a fundamental principle in the way that humans work. If your goal is to heal, you're never going to heal. That's what I've observed. You're always going to have something to fix. If your goal is to perform in your life, healing is just one of the steps that you go through. People typically hit about 80% of their goals, and that's why people who want to heal never heal. And I could literally, after interviewing 10,000 people in clinic and then hundreds of thousands of people afterwards, I can tell you by the way they describe their situation at the time they talk to me whether it's going to work or not. And their situation always boils down into one of two categories. I'm broke and I want to get this fixed so I can go back to doing whatever. Or I want to do something in my life and my body's stopping me. The first one, and there's different ways of saying that, but that's what it comes down to. Basically, I'm broke and I want to get back to zero. That means that there's no acknowledgement that the life that they had led to where they're at.
Right.
And they'll say like, well, that's not fair. I had a car accident. I'm like, you drove 100,000 times in your life or 1,000,000 times in your life, and you never had an accident. Why did you have it that day? I'm going to say that the body, when it's functioning properly, doesn't even have accidents. These are malfunctions.
Wow. I'm compelled to share this funny little anecdote from my first ayahuasca experience 12 years ago. I went in with the intention of healing, and I wasn't injured. I'm a college scholarship athlete, played semi-pro for a little bit, but I had relatively no injuries. So going into my first weekend, I was like, healing. What am I healing? And I'm tripping for 3 days straight and doing this just deep and profound work. And on the evening of the third night, after the third ceremony, I'm standing there talking to a guy, still in the medicine, still he and I are engaging in a very high vibrational conversation. I pass out. And when I pass out, I injure my knee so badly. I had a massive bone bruise. I came back to consciousness with a group of people standing over me, looking down like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" So it's like, I had the intention to heal that weekend. And in the weekend, I went back to Atlantis and I went back to the family tree and I worked with them and I had this incredible experience. And sure as shit, my intention to heal was then thrown this curveball of a severe bone bruise on my right knee because I passed out on the third night. So that absolutely resonates with me.
So I'd go a step further and say that in this life, you didn't feel supported by your father or the men in your life,
Hmm. What makes you say that?
right, D? The body
Right.
doesn't lie.
Yeah.
So
Right side masculine. Yeah.
it needs their support. So you asked to heal your body.
Gave me
Says,
an injury.
yeah, yeah. I can actually feel the emotion coming up in you now.
Yeah. Wild. Wild.
So this is where, people they talk to me about this all the time. Like when I was on TV last week, she goes, "How'd you know about my father?" And I'm like, "Well, I can feel it, and your body just confirms it. Our body, every part of our body our bodies are not sick. They're not broken. They're trying to communicate to us, but we have not, we have lost the understanding or understanding of the language that the body speaks. And we've been taught to just drive, and if something breaks, then fix it. But that's not how it works. Our body has a lot of capacity, like infinite capacity before it breaks or before it injures itself. Because like you see people, they fall down all the time and nothing happens. And then one day they trip on a stair and they fall like 2 inches and they shatter something.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between the time that they trip and they shatter something and the time that the other 100 times they did that? It's not chance. It can't be chance. And if we just look at it from a purely statistical standpoint, it can't be chance.
Mhm.
There is really no accidents. And you have a guy who's drunk who drives a car, and three other people in the car, and he crashes the car. He lives. He falls asleep. He lives. Everybody else dies. That's a really common story. And the one thing that I noticed in those types of stories, working with all these cases of injuries, was that that person was asleep, so he was no longer resisting what was coming at him.
Right.
And that's really what it is. If we resist in our life, emotionally, physically, perceptually, physically, if we resist, we will have some sort of pain in that resistance.
Mhm. I totally get that. That makes so much sense to me. You're touching on something very, I think, fundamental to my worldview, and I think the people that are, I know, my listeners, which is we are putting the faith and confidence in a very small number of people
Yeah.
to keep us healthy. And actually, it's not even keep us healthy, but to treat disease and treat symptoms. And so this idea of if everybody, your neighbor, your auntie, your Uncle Sean, knew how to do these maneuvers and did them in a way and shared them in a way that empowered the body to do what the body is designed to do, then that decentralizes um, everything. It decentralizes sick care. It decentralizes the healthcare system, and I think that that's a really important idea, and that that's got ripples that go out into infinity because if we don't know that these techniques, these trades, grounding, fasting, this sort of more ancient biohacking, the sort of naturalistic approaches to biohacking, sun gazing or whatever, these sorts of things, fascial maneuvers, then it undermines the paradigm, which brings
Yeah.
me to my next point. As I was posting on Instagram right before we hit record, I tagged you. Or at least I tried to tag you on Instagram, and I got this alert. This account has repeatedly posted, Human Garage on Instagram. This account has repeatedly posted false information that was reviewed by independent fact checkers or went against our community guidelines. Do you want to mention this account, mention anyway or cancel. And that tells me everything I need to know about like, okay, like it confirmed what I already knew is that you are undermining the paradigm. Can you speak to that alert? Do you know where that
Sure.
came from?
Yeah, I mean, we had a shadow ban that hit us on August 8th, and it didn't just hit us, it hit, like millions of people. But in our world, like a lot of people that were around, it it doesn't seem to be indiscriminate. It was very targeted. When we went to appeal, there was no appeal process. I mean, we could put it in, but nobody answered. And what they censored us on specifically. Now, I talk about chemtrails. I talk about child sex trafficking. I talk about vaccines. I talk about the military industrial complex. I talk about transgender. I mean, I have talked about anything and everything you can possibly imagine. So, what we got banned for was talking about structured water.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
And it goes back, and the repeated violations is because they launched a new AI, and it went back and it pulled posts from even 2 years ago where I was talking about what a watermelon has or a coconut. Because it with the thing was, should you drink your water or eat your water? So listen, that issue with and ironically, this is on Instagram, okay? Ironically, as a result, and everything happens for a reason, okay? So ironically, as a result, our Facebook started blowing up because people couldn't get their content. So in the last 5 weeks, we've gone from 10,000 or 50,000 or whatever to 300,000 on Facebook, and it's growing with posts going into the 5-10 million range. So it's people are going to find, and they're going to get to us wherever they want to get to us, and wherever we go, they're going to be there. But the irony of the whole situation is that if you try to censor something that is free, it's not self-serving, it helps everybody, it's supported by everything from science all the way through to moms and dads and coaches, it's it will just cause more people to want to look. And
Yeah.
so I'm thinking I mean, it did hit us in the pocketbook for like a lot, like and right in our tour. But I'm thanking them for doing that because it's now pushing us into other platforms where we should have been going. Like we have an X account, which by the way, for 5 years I've been trying to get into my own account, couldn't get into it, and then somebody provided me the opportunity to get into it um, 2 months ago, and I'm like, well, that's kind of crazy. The timing of this, I said that would mean that something's coming up. Sure.
Uh-huh.
So anyways, our shadow ban will be removed in the next week or so, and probably by the time this thing airs. And listen, there is a it is so simple. We are trying to hack all of these things to help the body perform. And there's a basic principle of the body that I learned because I came through like biohacking. I started in the 70s. And the principle is this. It's like if you think about a bathtub, and the bathtub, the bottom line of getting water in a bathtub. Well, if the drain is open, what we're doing in biohacking is let's turn on more water. Let's just keep turning it on. But if we really want to fill the tub and keep it there, why don't we just plug the hole? And what I've noticed about my experience in the biohacking world is we're trying to overpower everything.
Yeah.
And the body actually doesn't work that way. Like if I give you a shot of alcohol and you're completely drunk first time, and I give it to you a week later, you're completely drunk again. Then I give you one every second day, and then every day, then twice a day. After a while, you're no longer drunk, but you have to keep putting more power on to get that same response. That is how the human body works. And what I have found in working with people after prescribing tens of millions of dollars of supplements in various businesses, because even before I was at the clinic. I had a supplement business, and back in the 90s, and I've always been active in the health side. But tens of millions of dollars of supplements. Here's what I found: my body didn't need them. My body needed was a very, very basic certain base of minerals, which is it needed silica because of the environmental toxins and were being depleted so that it could absorb selenium, calphos, and all the other elements. And when those were in place, building blocks, then it could absorb the minerals, so Irish sea moss. And then from there, all I had to do was move and breathe. And everything after that is just a benefit. But today, none of our supplements actually replace a function of the body. The ones that we have enable the body to reduce inflammation, come off sugar, and mineralize, and that's it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm experiencing some of the same thing and I've been in the health space since 2012, and you can imagine as the host of a podcast, I've tried
There,
probably thousands of different supplements. I mean, like you name it, from the esoteric and Ormus to whatever, vitamin C. I've tried so many different things, and I am the strongest, the fittest, and the most flexible now with far fewer supplements and vitamins. And I believe that it is exactly that. I think it's mineral. I think there's a mineral explanation there. I think that there's some other sort of lifestyle things that I'm doing, but I've got Irish sea moss that I actually picked up in Ireland when I went earlier this year that I drink daily, and it's had a huge thing. And to your point, you can have really expensive piss, and if you're not detoxing properly and you're not letting the body do what it's supposed to do, if you're not, um, if you're not plugging that drain, you're just stacking a bunch of stuff on top of faulty foundation, which just leads to, again, expensive piss and confusion. And we can do blood work to figure out what our nutrient deficiencies are, but I'll tell you, and we talked about this when I was on when we did our IG live. The 5 day dry fast totally reset my body. The
yeah.
like totally reset my body. I'm carrying 12 pounds less easily, not really changing my diet anymore. Inflammation in my face. I mean, if you could see a picture from before and after,
I can see the difference right now. Yeah.
yeah, my skin is glowing. The bags, the dark circles and bags under my eyes went away, and that's free. 5 day dry fast are free.
So that's why we started this journey, literally started the journey with a 44-day fast, 2 weeks of dry. And I I have had enough input and enough science to know that what I was seeing and reading and hearing and being told wasn't exactly the complete story. And I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying it's not the complete story. For example, when you're in the third day of a fast, your body is producing stem cells. So what cell in the body can a stem cell not become? Well, the answer is it can become anything. It can become a muscle cell, a fascial cell, a skin cell, a nerve cell. It can become a brain cell, a liver cell. It can become an egg. It can become a sperm. So when I'm not eating, my body is producing the healing mechanism. So then that even questions, how is food the medicine?
Right.
And we're breaking down the narratives. And again, I'm playing with this concept. And today, when I fast, for 2 years, I fasted for 6 months a year, on and off, on and off. And what I found is that even after about 10 days of fasting, I would just stop sleeping because I'm getting DMT throughout the day.
Mhm.
And incredibly functional, like the best I've ever been. And of course, I would lose weight as I was fasting, but today, you can't tell if I'm fasting or not. Physically, I don't have a difference. I'm at that 0 point. And when I do get to see you, you'll touch us, and you'll see that this is one thing that people always come up try and touch me. This is 80% water. I am legitimately 80% water. My body feels like the same as a 6-month-old baby, not like a 10-year-old boy. a 6-month-old baby, that's what my body feels like. It's got this jelly shape to it. And it does. It looks like a muscle, but it's not muscle. I've actually reduced my muscles to the bare minimum. And I'm stronger than I've ever been. Like I can easily put you on my back and run up a hill. And I do this while I'm on tour. I do this in our class training. I show people visceral strength, and I show them also a lightness in my body that they can't explain. I just don't believe that the way that we've looked at performance in the human body is the ultimate way. And I looked at these comparisons. Tyson Gay, the fastest man in the world, was a client of mine. I never worked with Usain Bolt, but I know Tyson really well. And he's like a machine full of muscle, and he runs, it's like a locomotive. And was the fastest man. He could never beat Hussein. And Hussein just whips. Hussein runs what I call fascially. Tyson runs through muscle, and muscles peak their performance because of restriction. That's some point. And I believe, even like gymnasts, pound for pound, they're the strongest in the world. And the big Swedes and the big Norwegians in the strongest man contest, they go and pick up boulders, and they're not muscular, they're big. They're not muscular. And so I challenged the concept of muscle being the best way to perform, because in my life, that wasn't true now. I performed better than I did when I was 20. And by the way, I am leaking parts of this out. We are setting up a performance program, which we're going to release next year. I'm already talking to some pro teams about it right now.
What else can you tell us about the performance program?
It is the exact opposite of what you've been taught. It's the reduction of muscle, not the increase of muscle. So take your arm, go like this, and get your full range of motion as much as you can. Like find where it goes to. Now, close your fist and do that. It restricts, right?
Yeah.
So if I grab my fist and I pull something or I push something, I'm creating restriction in the joints. That's why as a bodybuilder, I couldn't touch my head. One of the key metrics of the ability for the bodies to continue to perform is mobility through joints.
Mm.
And as I build muscle, I restrict mobility in the joint naturally. And this is one thing that, like today, I'm like completely ambidextrous. I can flip my scapula. It's a completely different. And listen, I'm in this experimentation phase. It's working, and it's demonstratively working out there to the point where I have some very serious pro and professional and elite athletes around the world, like Anthony Kunkel. This guy's gonna, I think, win the Leadville 100. They race for 18 hours straight. He runs 200 miles a week. Now that's performance, by the way.
Yeah.
And he runs more than some people drive their cars. And I have these elite athletes around the world starting to do this to first reduce restriction, and then there's another avenue of turning that into performance afterwards using pressure in the body.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait. That's going to be so exciting. Watching you and your team do some of these maneuvers is looks like an ecstatic experience. I mean,
It
you've
is.
got a person behind holding, you've got another person, isolating the opposite shoulder, you've got twisting, you've got whispering happening and affirmations and observations all happening. It is like it's like a symphony of healing and I think a big part of the reason why people are gravitating toward this is not because they do any of the maneuvers, because I have not really done any of the maneuvers except for the ones that I've seen from today. But I think people get it right away. They watch people get these amazing releases. The pain and you no longer need to hold on to the pain of your mother. You no longer need to whatever it, it I think it speaks to an ancient part of us,
Right.
that we know is inside of us. Like it just resonates immediately. And I don't know. There's not really a question there other than just to honor the work that you're doing and just how impactful it looks.
So let's do another one. Take your right hand, put it right above your right hip. So right where your iliocyncal valve is. So between your belly button and your hip. And twist a little bit. Take your left hand, put it on your neck, and breathe in through your mouth. 2, 3, through the nose. 2, 3. Say, I no longer want to hold this grief in my body.
I no longer want to hold this grief in my body.
I'm letting it go so I can move forward in my life.
I'm letting it go so I can move forward in my life.
I'm feeling supported by the men in my life.
I'm feeling supported by the men in my life. Hmm. Instant buzz in the head.
Yeah, like a blood rush right up
For
here.
sure. Yeah, yeah, right in the front.
So the bigger question is, why does that happen? Let's do
Yeah,
one more.
sure.
Right hand on the left hip. Pull the skin towards the belly button to stretch it up. Take the left hand, put it behind your neck. Breathe in. Now through your nose 3 times. 2, 3. I no longer need to overthink to feel safe.
I no longer need to overthink to feel safe. Hmm.
What are you feeling now?
Like a tingling in my entire left side, really present in my left elbow. Again, emotional, um, an emotional upwelling. Um, when people if folks are less interoceptive, um eh, people listening now will understand that, but it's like if you just what's going on in your body, can you feel what's going on in your body? If people are less interoceptive, does that make them slightly less I don't know, receptive to the transformation through some of these maneuvers?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. Like the certain people are built to not feel their body. Like even astrological signs like Capricorns, they are built not to feel so they can move. And Aries quite often are built not to feel so they can move. And they usually have more physical issues in their body later on. So the also, if somebody has a lot of stress and trauma in their body, they can't feel. If they're on SSRIs or mood stabilizers, or yeah, those things like Wellbutrin, you can't feel when you're on it. Like it's a bizarre sensation, but that's the whole thing. It numbs down the feeling sensation of the body. But our brain is actually interpreting those feelings. If you numb them down, the brain no longer has the ability to interpret your environment. So and it also leads to the question is it a placebo? And this is one of my favorite questions, by the way. Because I ask people, even doctors, and they ask me, I said, well, have you ever studied the placebo effect? Like studied it, not just read the headlines. There's 4.5 million studies over 55 years that show you whether it's a medication or a surgery, no matter what it is. 1/3 of the time, your sheer belief that it will work is the instrument that makes it work. Which also people don't read that 1/3 of the time your belief it won't work is the instrument and why it doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
which if you step back from a statistical point of view, that means that the last third is invalid, because it means it either works because you believe it or because it don't. And so and people, we've turned this placebo thing into this discussion into this negative discussion. And I just want to challenge that, because at the core of it, I have people come in and they're like hunched over, they can't walk, they're up walking, and they're going, what if it's a placebo? And I'm like, what if it is a placebo? You weren't walking 30 minutes ago, now you're walking. You weren't walking for 20 years. What do you care? Well, what if it goes back? And I said, well, you just did this in 30 minutes. Do it again.
Yeah, right.
But we are so hardwired in these words that we've been taught, in these things that we say, what, this is bad, or this is not good, or this is good. And we don't really know the truth behind what works and what doesn't work, because we're, as a society, we're no longer willing to observe. What we do is we say, well, did that work? No, I'm not even going to try it because it doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? Well, there's no science behind it. And I'm like,
Yeah,
really? I mean, the science has to be N of one, because there is no two bodies on the planet that act the same. And
right.
so it doesn't matter if it works for 50 people, 100 people, or 50,000 people. Until I put it in my body, until I try it in my body, I don't know if it works or not. End of
Yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah. I think the last 4 years have been as challenging as they've been. They've I think it denotes a paradigm shift in how we think of reductionist, materialist modes of thought, how we think of quote unquote the science. Like I think it woke enough people up to start asking important questions and seeking out their own health. And I mean, I'm really encouraged by that. I have a couple more questions, man. We could go all day, but I know that you're in your rest days before you kick things back up again. When I think about sort of complementary modalities to this work, I think about Rolfing or emotional freedom technique, chiropractic, flotation therapy. Are there other modalities that complement really well with this?
Yeah, moving through nature.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you can use whatever you want. And I still every once in a while give an adjustment chiropractically. Um, but that's usually just because I have a limited time and I'm going to move through something a little faster, help the body adapt. But the truth of the truth of this is the real bottom line is that if you do fascial maneuvers, is slow motion dancing. Dancing was an element that was done at the end of each day in the towns and the villages by everybody independently, and they moved and they danced, which helped them remove the physical aspects and the emotional aspects of the trauma that they accumulated through the day. And fascial maneuvers is technically a slow motion dance.
Mhm.
And what we're doing when we restrict is we breathe and we're actually moving the inside, because the skin separates our internal and our external environment. And we're so used to moving this, but we don't move the inside of the body properly. And that's what it does, is it moves the inside of the body underneath the skin to balance the outside of the body, the movement outside. And if you go get on your hands and knees and you do something like animal flow, or you crawl through, yeah, the best thing, like if you have a problem with your body and I take you up to Shannon Falls, where we are in Vancouver, and I walk you up through the big boulders and the rocks, and I do that a couple of days a week, your body will resolve itself of all the pain very, very quickly, because you're not grabbing, you're actually hands down moving. So yes, you can use anything else. I don't recommend, the idea is, if you have a way of soothing your body now, continue to do that.
Hmm.
Add fascial maneuvers in, and then as you need less of what you are doing, just do less of it. We're not here to compete with anybody. And this is the whole thing. It's not a competition, because this is something that you can do by yourself. You don't need a third party to do it to you. And that's really at the end of it. It's there, and it's not like yoga. Yoga stretches a muscle. Muscles move in rotation. When you do a lateral stretch on a muscle, you are destructuring the rotational construct of the fascia or the stability of the fascia. So as we added stretching into professional sports, injuries went up 7,000% over 10 years.
Yeah.
The reason why is because fascia is your structure. So I think it's for people to start looking at what feels good in their body and repeating that over time. Because they, like even myself, like as I started to go into this, I had belief system. I mean, I had a lot of belief systems of how my body worked. I've been told everything. I'd studied all these things, modalities, practices, done all these things. And it shocked me that something new could come up.
Mhm.
The best thing is to just try it. You go to our website, there's a 15-minute stress reset. There's literally thousands of videos on social media, and that can get overwhelming. But go to the website, which is a directory, and try a 15-minute stress reset. Try a lower reset, which is meant as a stress reset with a lower body addition, or try an upper reset, which is all from basically the diaphragm up, and the head, the neck, the shoulders. Try those resets and do them over a course of 3 to 7 days, and then measure yourself.
Mhm.
Because there's a reason why 30 million people are doing this around the world today, and it's gaining about 1.5 million a month. And there's millions of practitioners now recommending it daily. The reason why is because it works.
Mhm.
And it costs nothing. It's non-invasive. Um, I haven't heard of anybody who's hurt themselves doing it amazingly. So it's not like you're hurting yourself when you're doing this yourself. It's working with the body in the body's natural flow of nature.
Mhm. Well said. Well said. Well, I have 1,000 more questions, but I'll just keep it to just a few before we take off. And again, I grok it. Every word, the way that you're delivering this information is just I think it's really important. I think it's really important for people to hear. Um before I'll narrow it down to the last question. It's the same fill in the blank question that I ask each of my guests over 450 times. Um, but before I ask that question, where should people go to learn more?
I think the best place to go is the website is a good place to start your experience. And you can start with a basic reset like we talked about, and then go to a 28-day reset where we train you. If you want to become a coach or a practitioner, everything from beginner all the way through to practitioner is free of charge. And that's super important.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we do not monetize any of the education to help yourself or help others. You can come to a workshop and you can pay us, but you don't have to. They come there for an experience and connection and community. And you can, it's important that we keep it free because it's worldwide and the majority of people don't have the financial resources to do it. So start off with a couple of resets. Try the 28-day reset, which we start to train and educate you. Then the lifestyle artist level 1 and level 2. And the only thing that we ask in exchange for that is that you share it and help others. And this is why it's growing. Um, the the way to engage with us and see what's going on in our lives and get more of the flavor around it is to check us out on any social media platform. Um, Currently, by the time this airs, we will be on full force on all platforms again. And then there's a way to get more context around it because we have hundreds of contributors that are contributing around the world, from everything from doctors to scientists to sports to media people who are participating and helping you see different versions of health around us.
Hmm.
And I really encourage people to go and start consuming some of that content. And then through the course of their time, stop consuming content. Because that's really why we got into this trouble as a society. It's we are what we eat, and we eat a lot of shit on content and through media today. And
Yeah.
I only consume content that we create or directly that I'm working with, and outside that, I don't consume any content. And that's been one of the biggest changes for me in my personal health and life.
Wow. Well, I'm in. I'll be diving into it and learning more about it and following that protocol that you just shared. I'm already thinking about how I use it, how I can use it in my coaching capacity and how I can, combine this with my work with people
Hey,
with psychedelics. Yeah.
I want to say something. So we have a 28-day reset that completely walks somebody through a life reset. And you can, as you're coaching people, it's free of charge. All of our intellectual property is free for use. You can monetize it all you want. So people actually coach people through the 28-day resets, or they add the 28-day reset to their coaching programs. So you're
Yeah.
welcome to do that. And because they have journal prompts and things that they're doing through it. And again, build your business on us. That's how this works.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I will receive that gift. Thank you. So this will be the last question that I ask, and like I mentioned before, it's a fill in the blank, and you can elaborate as much or as little as you want, and this can be based on really anything. It doesn't have to be specific to fascial maneuvers, but please fill in the blank. Everyone would benefit from knowing.
That the body heals itself without anything external. And the only thing I need is minerals, breath, and movement. And everything else is extra and quite often wasted.
Gary, thank you for joining me today on the Optimal Performance Podcast.
It's been my pleasure, Sean.